As evening starts to fall this afternoon, Marty and I have the homestead to ourselves. I just got back from watching Lizzie perform at the State Show Chorus Festival, picked Marty up from his cousin's house down the road, changed out of my work clothes, and into some work clothes, if you know what I mean, and now he and I are going to fire up the sap stove. This morning, before leaving for some work travel, I collected another 5 gallons I couldn't get last night in the dark, and dumped it into the evaporator before covering it to protect it from today's rain, bringing the level up to about 15 gallons total. I expect to have a good boil tonight and find something a little closer to maple syrup by morning. Marty is going to help me start the fire. It's not enough. Because it burns really quickly, so you're going to have enough to get it to catch the big stuff on fire.
But there's no big stuff in it.
Now that the fire has been started, it's time to work on another project that will allow for some high-quality father-son time. I didn't know prior to having kids how much fun it would be to coach young people. Turns out, I love coaching. I volunteer to coach pretty much every sport the kids want to play in our town rec league. Lizzie is too old for rec league now, but Martin is starting to get into it, and I'm enjoying coaching him and his classmates as much as I did when Liz went through the programs. This winter, Mars really bloomed on the basketball court. He seems to really enjoy it and now wants to play all the time. Unfortunately, our driveway hasn't been conducive to the type of late night, under the lights, practice till your mom calls you in for bed practice sessions I enjoyed as a kid at my parents' house. Luckily, one half of the driveway is dry enough to at least get a few shots in. So, while the sap stove comes up to temperature, it's time to play a little P.I.G. Unfortunately, Marty is good enough now that I actually have to try, and even then, he sometimes beats me. You gonna grab some pieces like that?
I don't like that.
Yeah, you can throw those in. All those little ones. They burn just as well as all this stuff.
So do I just put them all in?
Yeah, be careful not to burn yourself. Go ahead. Gotta get them in the fire though. There you go. Good, thanks. Want some more? And we're gonna stoke it right up. There you go. Good job, man.
How do we put that down?
I will take care of that. I usually have gloves on. Can I leave my gloves out here or I'll bring them in? The way I make maple syrup isn't for everyone, but then most of the things I do seem to fall into that category. Likewise, the way most people, at the homestead and even up to the small producer level, do it, isn't for me. Again, that seems to be true of a lot of stuff. Many people who do this on the side of a day job run themselves ragged, coming home from work, rushing out to the sugar bush, collecting the sap, and then spend all night keeping the fire going. Then, they have to go to work the next day on very little sleep. And if the sap happens to be flowing well, like it is this week in Central Maine, they get to do the whole thing again for who knows how many nights in a row. Well, I pulled enough all-nighters and worked by headlamp for days at a time, enough to last me a lifetime when I was a commercial farmer. I really value my sleep, and lack of it is one of the things that helped me decide to get out of commercial farming. Maple syrup is no different than any other project at Nights and Weekends Homestead. It's called Nights and Weekends, not all nights and weekends. So, generally, I save up my sap until I have enough to at least fill the pan, then start a fire in the late afternoon and keep it stoked up. Then, just before I go to bed, I head out, check the level, and, if I think it's appropriate, I'll build the fire up one more time. Then, in the morning, I either have something I feel is ready to bring into the house to finish off, or I need to start the sap stove up again and add a little more sap. This morning, I think I'm at a point where I can bring what remains of last night's boil into the house to finish on the kitchen stove. For years, I either filtered with cheesecloth or did not filter at all. Although I haven't tapped trees for a couple years, I got these filters just before I stopped. I think my father, who produces quite a bit on the property he and my mother own, gave them to me because he had them lying around and was upgrading. Anyway, they're clearly superior to cheesecloth, and there's a bunch of junk in the syrup, partially because I boil outside in the open air, that needs to come out. These filters are plastic mesh, which means I want to use them as many times as possible before discarding them. This sink was in the basement of our house when Em and I bought it 4 years ago. I could immediately see the appeal for projects like this. The last part of the process, finishing the boil, has always provided interest for me because of the fascinating qualities water possesses. One of them is the amount of energy water can take in and hold. It doesn't take a lot of energy to get water to warm up, at least under certain circumstances. But once it gets close to the boiling point of the sap, the water seems to be able to take in an incredible amount of energy before it moves any farther up in temperature. So, this part of the boil is sometimes frustrating. You have to watch to make sure the temperature reaches 219 degrees Fahrenheit, but you don't want it going over that, certainly not by very much, for very long. Or you start to get maple candy and it's almost instantaneous. You go from, oh my goodness, is it ever going to reach 219? I've been here for hours, to, great, I just ruined a batch, pretty much in the blink of an eye. That said, ruined syrup is still pretty awesome, because, as I said, it's maple candy. Only problem with it is, maple candy doesn't pour very well.